Hello there, everyone, and welcome to GamePoints episode 319. Our weekly we'll get together. We talk about recent gaming news. I'm, as always, your host, Stephen Brown, and tonight, the UK is threatening the existence of loot boxes, Skate 4 will be free to play, and Netflix's Resident Evil is god-awful. All that and more, but first, I want everyone here to know that this is an audience interactive podcast. So if you're watching live, Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over here at Twitch TV/GamePoints, or later at any myriad of video hosting platforms, be it YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, etc., feel free to join the conversation by leaving your questions, comments, concerns, etc. in the various chat boxes down below. Just try to keep them germane to the topics on hand. I'm very curious to know what other people out there think. That way you can escape the echo chamber to see if I'm off base or if I'm just dead on target here. Before I get into this UK government with loot boxes thing, I did want to mention that lately I have been playing Terminator Resistance. Now, this is a very, very budget first-person shooter that came out about a couple years ago back. It really feels like a PlayStation 3 game, but if you're looking for a first-person shooter that actually has heart, I'd recommend taking a look at it. It's probably the best Terminator game I've ever played. That's not saying much. But I do like to kind of keep people abreast of what I'm playing around right now, and that is what I have been fiddling around with outside the normal mainstays. I am shocked by how faithful it is to the lore, which is a hard thing to say in today's environment where everything seems to be a, well, Netflix adaptation of something, and we all know what those two words ascribe themselves to. Speaking of the Resident Evil thing from earlier, we'll get into that later. I just wanted to mention that specifically because in a world of terrible adaptations, this video game's taken a licensed property and actually done something pretty cool with it. Anyways, to the news. First story on the docket today comes from Video Game Chronicle. The United Kingdom government says games industry must act on loot boxes or face legislation. Now, as y'all know, I tend to be anti-legislation up to a point. For the most part, I think this is one of those things that the market will take care of. There's a reason why you don't see really many loot boxes out there anymore outside of a few franchises and mobile games. After the Star Wars Battlefront 2 fiasco, the consumer more or less went, this is fucking dumb, stop it. And they have since, overall, as an industry, pulled back on the idea of loot boxes. That's not to say monetization has gone away. What is taking their place is now the Battle Pass. And, of course, remember, if it's a mobile game, that's a completely different field. Diablo Immortal, I'm looking at you. But it seems like the government, the UK is going to be joining many other European governments, which I also believe includes the Netherlands. Belgium's dipping their toe in it. I think we had a story about Italy not all that long ago looking into this, that are tired of the avarice of some of these companies and are jumping in now to say, stop it or we'll stop it for you. Or at the very least form a committee to look into a commission, to create a panel, to think about maybe passing something to get onto it. Because governments are ponderous and will do things at the slowest speed possible because it credits them the most money they can spend. Anyways, to the article itself. Haha. A 2020 call for evidence on loot boxes, launched by the UK's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, found that players who purchased loot boxes may be more likely to experience gambling, mental health, financial, and problem gaming related harms. This risk may also be higher for children and young people, it was found. On Sunday, the government called for the purchase of loot boxes to be made unavailable to children and young people unless they are approved by a parent or a guardian. As a side note, I don't know how it is in the UK, but to be able to use a credit card, you have to be at least 18. And to buy these things, you need a credit card. So they're already passively getting their parents' permission. This seems more like the case of the parent not paying any goddamn attention to what their kid is buying. I have a hard time faulting a company when the parent needs to be aware of what the hell is going on. That said, I do know that this used to be the case that you can go to like a GameStop, pay cash for one of their free download cards and do it that way. So it's not necessarily a 100% for sure solution. I am, however, not willing to take away what is the ultimate responsibility of the parents and place it on the government, companies in this case. If your kids are buying loot boxes, it's because you're a shitty parent, or you don't care. One of the two, which probably means you're a shitty parent. Anyways, back to the article itself. UK Culture Secretary Nadine Dorris said the following: "We want to stop children from going on spending sprees online without parental consent." I just addressed that. Spurred on by in-game purchases like loot boxes. Game companies and platforms needed to do more to ensure that controls, age restrictions are applied so the players are protected from the risk and gambling harms. Children should be free to enjoy gaming safety whilst giving parents and guardians the peace of mind they need. I do agree, however, that loot boxes are gambling. I don't care what EA or Activision or Sony, PlayStation, Microsoft, Nintendo, I don't care what any of those people say. Loot boxes are straight up gambling. You are paying money to get a random prize, be it nothing or something else out there. Now they see these things don't have digital value or real world value. That's bullshit, because if they didn't have real world value, then why are they charging you real world money for them? They clearly do have real world value. Back to the article itself. The Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sports says it plans to form a working group comprised of game companies, platforms, and regulatory bodies in order to develop what it calls industry-led measures to protect players and reduce the risk of harm. This is where I start rolling my eyes. The government's not actually doing anything in here. This is why I led off with such an odd opening here, where they're going to form a committee to create a panel to look into the possibility through a potential study that this might be doing something. Because I don't think that the government of UK is actually serious about this. I think the people in the UK, the government of UK, I think that the people in the government of the United Kingdom are opportunistically seeing dollar signs here. They don't actually care about loot boxes. What they care is creating more panels. What they care is spending more tax dollars. And I should not single out specifically the UK for this, because this is just government in general, right? The reason why these things take years to go through is because they get to spend your money doing it, the taxpayers' money. That's the main reason why they're looking into this, not because they're on some righteous crusade. It's one of two things. One, it's a talking point to get them reelected, or two, they get to make money off of it, specifically your money off of it, which is one of the reasons why I hate regulation. Just be aware of what's going on and go, fuck that. Like I said, loot boxes are on the decline, despite these big major stories we keep hearing about every now and then, because they are big and they generate traffic. It's the reason why I'm leading it with this, for example. Anger at loot boxes all-time high. Companies, for the most part, are going to put them in there, with the exceptions I addressed earlier, mobile gaming being the key one. It doesn't help that fucking Blizzard Diablo Immortal had their big debut riddled with horrendous loot box mechanics in there. This is one of those things that will solve itself, however, in my opinion. Back to the article. Where was I? Some examples of these industry-led measures can include parental controls, a feature already supported by all three main platform holders. Yes, that's what I was talking about. Sony, Xbox, and Nintendo require you to sign on through one of their, make an online account, sign in there, put your information in there, go from there, I believe. Protection should support the minority players who spend a disproportionate amount of money on loot boxes and who may be greater risk of harm, it said. That's interesting. That's them essentially saying, hey, we know that these mechanics are designed to milk money from like the 1% of the 1% of players that you have. We feel like these are the people who might have some compulsion issues, and there should be legislation in place to keep that from happening. This is the first time I think I've seen any government specifically call out what is colloquially known as the whale. You know, the people who spend, who compromise roughly like 99% of these games' income. Most people play free-to-play games, spend nothing or like less than $5. It's a very, very tiny sliver of the gaming population that spends the thousands to tens of thousands of dollars. The first time I think I've seen any regulatory body call that out specifically. It's going to be very interesting to see how developers and publishers react to that, because that is the reason why they make these games. They're looking for those whales. And if they put in implements to keep them from making money off of them, that means all of these free-to-play games, their worth goes to zero. Or is dramatically reduced in either case. Just wanted to mention that this is the first time I've seen it. Meanwhile, a bipartisan group of Dutch politicians recently proceeded with plans to outlaw randomized in-game purchases. That's even more than just loot boxes, by the way. Because loot box can be considered a very narrow definition. This is anything random that has any kind of real world cash associated with it, despite the fact that a publisher says, well, you buy the gems or the platinum to spend on there, and then the gems and the platinum is what you used to buy the loot box. Fuck off. That's just an extra step. We know what you're doing. I'd be very curious to see if these laws account for that. Back to the article. Bipartisan group of Dutch politicians recently proceeded with plans to outlaw randomized in-game purchases. The motion, which is still moving through the country's Senate, would see the Netherlands following Belgium's loot box ban. In April of 2018, the Belgian Gaming Commission found that loot boxes, such as those sold for real currency in FIFA's Ultimate Team mode, constituted gambling. As a result, the games have either had the loot boxes removed in Belgium or aren't sold there at all. EA, for example, announced in 2019 that it would no longer sell FIFA points in Belgium. Furthermore, once again, to go back to Diablo Immortal, that game is just not for sale in certain countries, which means that the loot box mechanic is so intrinsically tied to the gameplay of that game that Blizzard Activision, in Diablo's case, considers it unplayable to have them removed for sale in that country. Let's just cut through the BS here and get right to it. I don't know how I feel about government stepping in. And actually, I do know how I feel about government stepping in and doing this. I don't like it. That said, I do think that it is an inevitability that this is going to go through, or at the very least, threats of these are going to get these companies to just start abandoning the whole idea of randomized gambling mechanics in their games. Let's call them what they are, gambling mechanics in their games. This is very reminiscent of what happened in the early 90s when you had the video game ratings start to come out. You used to have a hodgepodge of rating systems. Every console kind of had their own thing. And then the government came in and said, and there was these famous videos of hearings of Joe Lieberman talking about Night Trap and Mortal Kombat, about how the industry needs to regulate itself or we will do it for you. And thus was born the ESRB, the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, I think is what it's short for. That's what gives you the M rated. I don't even remember what the ratings are anymore. It's been that long since I've actually paid attention to them. But the games ratings are all self-regulatory. It's not government regulation. It was, however, the threat of government regulation that caused them to act to create the ESRB. I don't know if that's the similar path that's going on down here. I get the feeling that publishers are going to ride this for as long as it takes, up to the very last minute, and then self-regulate them into non-existence before they let the government start getting their fingers into determining what can and can't be sold to kids and adults by extension. Because once that happens, once they get that foot in the door, they're just going to kick it down, and then it turns into it's not good for anyone. So I guess I should say I like the threat of this, but I don't like the implementation of this idea. Fortunately, as I led off with this, none of this is going to be happening anytime soon. This is going to take years to actually get to the point where there might even be a final draft of any kind of bill to be voted on, assuming it even gets that far. Let me know what you think down there before. Should government step in and regulate these companies when it comes to loot boxes, or should it just be up to the consumer? That's where I lead, is that should be up to the consumer, and I do think that does lead to changes in the industry. I gave an example earlier with going from loot boxes to battle passes. But I get that sometime, I don't even want to say that. Anyways, let me know what you think down there. Next topic on hand, we go to IGN. Skate 4 It's officially called Skate, lowercase s period. I hate it. And will be free to play and have cross-play and cross-progression. Awesome. Great. Cross-play and cross-progression is a good thing. More companies need to be embracing it. It's weird to me that Sony seems to be the last holdout on that. Some of their games are cross-progression, cross-play, but they're still very much grousing about the idea. To the article itself. Alongside Full Circle revealing that Skate 4 is officially called Skate, lower period, or period with lowercase, the studio confirmed that it'll be free to play on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Furthermore, it'll have crossplay and cross-progression support. The news was shared via Full Circle's The Boardroom update, and the team confirmed that Skate will take place in San Vansterdam, which is the city of sorts to Skate and Skate 2's San Vanona. It chose to go with the name Skate as opposed to Skate 4, saying that this is not a sequel, reboot, or remake, but a new platform that will be built upon for years to come. This means fans shouldn't expect Skate 5 or 10, but instead look forward to a skateboarding game that will continue to evolve for a very long time. Ladies and gentlemen, that means that this is a live service game, if that was not clear enough. This is going to be something that they are going to try to turn into the skateboarding equivalent of Destiny 2, or an MMO, or anything else out there that released years ago and they just keep updating more and more and more. This is the future of games, by the way. This is one of those things I have said multiple times. It's not just enough to get you to buy the game. Companies want that money for sure, but they are more interested in your time. They want your time. They want you to come back every week for the new event, or the new story patch, or the extra maps, or this limited time skin that you can only get if you play the game between 3 and 6 p.m. on Monday the 25th. I hate it. I hate the live service pivot on these games, and I think it is going to... All of this is going to end up imploding on itself, because I do believe it is unsustainable, because people can always scrounge up more money. You can work an extra shift. You can go without your double latte. You can choose not to smoke that pack of cigarettes. You can get the regular size McDonald's meal instead of the jumbo size McDonald's meal. You can always get a couple extra bucks more to afford that extra game or to get that extra little bit of content. What you can't do, however, is suddenly make a 25th hour appear in the day. That is an impossibility. You cannot get more time. You can almost always find a way to squeeze more money out of someone, but you cannot have them give up more time. It doesn't work. There is a hard cap to it. So this aggressive pursuing of the consumer's time is eventually going to bottom out, which is going to lead to a major crash in these live service games. And the reason why these companies are pivoting to live service games is because the budgets of these things are getting more and more overblown, and they're needing to find a way to get more than just your $60, $70, $80 buy-in. That's why you have the $150 collector's editions. That's why they're so eager for pre-orders, so they can have that money now. That is why you had the loot box mechanics thrown in, though that is starting to get pushed back from governments. You're now starting to go, okay, enough of this shit. So they are turning to what they can try to, any other ways they can monetize things. And the live service route is it. And like I said, you can always get more money from someone, but you can't get time from someone. So when people's time gets capped out, suddenly you can't expand anymore, then the game industry suffers a major upset. That is why I'm worried about all these live service games. I think that it is folly to try to keep pursuing them. I think that we have seen the success of many smaller indie games that sell millions of copies, that you don't need a $500 million Call of Duty sized budget. You don't need $1 billion into the development of Red Dead Redemption so that way you see his horse testicles drop during the summer. You can cut a lot of that shit and still make an excellent quality game, because at the end of the day, all the flashy graphics and all the impressive cutscenes take a back seat to gameplay and story. This is the easy way out. Anyways, that's what I think. Let me know. Full Circle does have 4 hard rules they're following with this live service, by the way. So they're straight saying there'll be no pay to win, no map areas locked behind paywalls, no paid loot boxes, no paid gameplay advantages. However, you can still have some wiggle room here. For example, when they say no map areas locked behind paywalls, sure, you might get that map eventually. But if you pay $5.99 a month for it, you'll get the Skate All Access Pass, which gives you access to these maps 2 weeks in advance. Shit like that you gotta watch out for. Those right there sound nice on their face, and they could be great. I fully admit I am judging this game based on just this one article here as far as this monetization structure goes. Likely, what you'll also see are customizable skins. Maybe you can get the Tony Hawk skin for like 99 cents. You can buy boards from various deck companies out there. You can get specific art on whatever board you have going on, pay a little bit here and there to do it. One thing that I would be very curious to see, considering every other game company is dipping their toe into this shit, is whether or not EA is going to try to put NFTs into Skate, specifically when it comes to artwork for various skateboards out there. I know that NFT is considered a very toxic phrase in today's gaming industry and in general, because a lot of people don't see any value in them. Understandably so. But they're not going away. I've said for many months now, the idea of the NFT isn't going to go away. You're going to start seeing it working its way into games more and more and more, albeit under a different name that does not mean NFT. That is not NFT. You'll see it repackaged and sold to you as something else. Maybe like user-created graphic design or something like that. I'm not a marketer. They don't pay me to market these things for them. But that is what I see happening here as well, is that they might have some kind of marketplace where you can sell your own logos and designs on skateboards, and they just take a little cut here and there. A game like Skate would be prime for that. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea, but that would be a way for them to generate a lot more content. Whenever a game is free to play, all this is on the table because they have to justify its development costs somehow. Admittedly, all that's also on the table when it's like a single player experience with no online components whatsoever, but it's just more than likely to happen in something like this. Anyway, Skate, it sounds like it will be coming out soon-ish. I think they have a closed beta or an open beta coming out soon. I'm not positive. The bad host that I am didn't bother to look it up because at the end of the day, I don't have any interest in Skate, but I know a lot of people do. And if you're one of those people, please let me know what you think about this monetization system they're setting up here. Coming up next from PC Gamer, CD Projekt stock is now worth only a quarter of what it was before Cyberpunk 2077 released. That's how bad of a hammering CD Projekt has taken, is that they've lost 75% of their valuation. To the article itself right here. A new report from Business Insider Poland paints a grim picture for CD Projekt. The company's value has cratered by over 75% since just before the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. A business that once boasted a market cap of over 40 billion Polish zloty, briefly becoming the most valuable company in Europe, is now worth less than 10 billion of that same currency. I think it's called the zloty. Forgive me if I am mispronouncing that. In the weeks leading up to Cyberpunk's launch, CDP shares were trading around 400 each, with hitting up to a max of 443 a share only 6 days before the game's release. The story since then has been one of sharp fall and brief plateaus of CDP shares and market cap halving in value in the first few months of 2021, then halving almost again since March of this year. In simpler terms, that means the reception of Cyberpunk 2077 and CDP's subsequent firefighting of problems have shorn off 5 years of the company's overall value. This is despite Cyberpunk 2077 selling almost 14 million copies in 2022 or 2020 alone. Ever since the game launch, the developer has been largely focused on fixing problems with the game, mainly on console, it has to be said. And the multiplayer mode that was once promised is now not happening. This is expected and should happen. CD Projekt Red was a game publisher and developer that I gave absolute trust to after seeing their work on the first 3 Witcher games. And then Cyberpunk comes out, and well, what more needs to be said about that? There is a reason why they're going back immediately to make The Witcher 4 rather than moving on to something else, despite saying, hey, The Witcher is the end of the saga for the most part. I know they're justifying by saying, well, we meant Geralt's saga. You'll play your own Witcher this time around. But let's face it, if Cyberpunk would have been the success that they were claiming it was going to be, they would be making Cyberpunk 2, or they would be making more content for Cyberpunk, or they could have even moved on to an entirely new thing. CD Projekt going back to The Witcher after Cyberpunk is not because they wanted to go back to The Witcher. It's because they have no choice but to go back to basics, as it were. It's a desperation move, especially when you realize that they've lost 5 years worth of value after launching Cyberpunk 2077. That means the entire development of that game was just poof, nothing. They sold 14 million copies and have nothing to show for it. And that's not counting any losses they've written off on the development either. That's so... I feel for them, but they fucked up. And when you fuck up, you got to pay the piper. Anyways, moving on to some other business news. This is a quick one right here. As announced earlier this week, the agreement to acquire Bungie has now closed. So Bungie is now officially part of PlayStation. Remember, a few months back, they announced their intent. PlayStation announced their intent to acquire Bungie for I don't remember how much, but it was quite a bit. Part of that deal, however, more or less included a rather hands-off approach when it came to deciding what Bungie gets to say and do. It really feels like they're just more of a silent partner than this, an actual subsidy of PlayStation itself. It feels like PlayStation's a silent partner in Bungie. I'm not really sure what PlayStation is going to be doing, if anything, to help manage the day-to-day operations of Bungie. I'm sure that they are giving them a lot of behind-the-scenes support, but Bungie's just kind of allowed to keep on doing their thing, and honestly, that's possibly the smartest thing PlayStation can do. Why would you want to go in there and fuck up what they're in the middle of? Nah, you don't want to do that. Just let them do their thing and take your cut at the end of each quarter. Related also to more PlayStation acquisitions, we go to GameIndustry.biz. PlayStation continues esports expansion with repeat GG acquisition. The technology platform will continue to support all game consoles after the acquisition. To the article. PlayStation is considering to ramp up its investment in esports with the acquisition of technology platform Repeat GG. Repeat GG hosts leaderboard tournaments that are designed to make esports more accessible. It tracks how players are performing in games, allowing them to participate in competitions without having to be online at the same time. The company has hosted over 100,000 tournaments with more than 2.3 million participants. PlayStation has been investing heavily in esports alongside its continued investments in live multiplayer games. Of March of last year, Sony Interactive became the co-owner of EVO, the famous fighting game tournament. It also hosts PlayStation tournaments, which have involved 30 games and taken place in more than 70 countries. Last year, the players won more than $5 million in prizes. This is yet another sign that Sony is trying to move aggressively into the video game competition scene, which has been kind of, I mean, you still have EVO despite some of its problems that over the past few years, but it feels like it really took a step back. Now, a lot of that could be because COVID came in and essentially shut down a lot of these live tournaments that were going on, and we're just now slowly starting to get them back there. But for a moment there, esports was like the hottest thing, and then it really feels like it just kind of vanished. I shouldn't say vanished. It was still there, but it was no longer nearly as hot as it once was. I think Sony sees an opportunity here because everything has kind of dropped off a little bit to get in at a discounted price and then start putting in the resources and infrastructure to go back up into something that could actually be, I don't know, grand. I don't know what word I was looking for there specifically. But there is an opportunity here, and none of the major publishers have really stepped into this. I'm shocked that Microsoft hasn't really delved hard into this, considering some of their ideas. And Microsoft also is a big enough company that they can just throw money at a project and not even care. Also, along those lines, Google. But I don't think Google's really interested in the esports scenes. I think Google's barely interested in the console scenes in the video game space, considering that they did Stadia and, well, look how that turned out. I think that was more of just like a wild hair someone at Google got. And once again, due to the vast amount of wealth that company has, they could just throw a couple $100 million at a project and see if it sticks. Sony, however, PlayStation's their big brand. Like that's the moneymaker for them. So I can see them trying to put that PlayStation brand out there even more and to expand it beyond just consoles. And this would be definitely one way to do it while also maintaining a video game theme. I do think that Sony is going to also aggressively start trying to corner the market on fighting games. I wouldn't be surprised if one day you wake up to hear that they bought Capcom, for example. So yeah, this is something I wanted to mention. On its face, not that important, but in the light of many other moves Sony has made when it comes to video game tournaments, fighting game competitions, etc., definitely something to consider. Other random small little update here that I wanted to bring up. A few weeks ago, we talked about how Embracer was creating this video game digital archive. I'm all for it. I like the idea of it. Well, we have some idea of how much they've spent on there now, and it seems to be that number is $2 million. A lot for you and I watching this here at home, but for a company like Embracer, it's actually not that much. That said, it's $2 million more than many other people are doing, so I'm glad they're still putting money into this thing. I hope it continues to grow. From the little article from gamesindustry.biz right here, a new report reveals that Embracer so far has spent $2 million in its efforts to archive retro video games. The group announced earlier this year that it was launching a new initiative with the aim of preserving as much of the games industry's history as possible. Embracer's website also says that it currently has 50,000 games, consoles, and accessories located in Sweden. I'm not going to get into too many details as what this video game archive exactly entails. We talked about it a few weeks back when they first announced the initiative. I'm just happy to see Embracer still supporting it, and I hope they continue to support it. One problem they're going to start running into, however, is the idea of digital archiving. It's digital, and what else are you going to say about it? And more games are going to start becoming digital only. Also, when you have your big collector's editions or that come and all that's in there is like a download code. Hell, you even have like physical editions sold in stores of games, and the only thing in them is it's a box, and you open it up, and it's a download code. I'm very curious to see how Embracer is going to get around that issue. But I do fully support this. I think video game preservation is something we need to be focusing way more on as an industry. You as a player, yeah, I mean, it does benefit you, but maybe not so much. But I think the industry itself really needs to get together and create some kind of archive as well. The more of these things we have, the better. Rocco, thank you very much for the bits. I'm shocked. I don't want to say shocked. I'm not surprised, actually. But I'm disappointed that the ESA, for example, the big lobbying firm for the video games industry in North America, hasn't tried to do some kind of archiving initiative as well. Instead, they're just leaving Embracer to do it. More power to Embracer, though. I hope this succeeds. We got a couple more stories I'm going to get through before I move into new releases. First up here from Video Game Chronicle. Paradox says Bloodlines 2 is, quote, in good hands, but it won't be shown at ParadoxCon 2022. I am very worried about this game and have been for quite a while. To the article. Paradox Interactive has offered a brief update on Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, which remains in development according to CEO Frederick Wester. In response to requests for the news about the game, Wester said on Tuesday that Bloodlines 2 is in good hands. However, he also told fans that the title isn't due to be shown at published ParadoxCon event in September. Bloodlines 2 was initially being developed by Hardsuit Labs and was scheduled for release in 2020, roughly 2 years ago. However, in August 2020, the action RPG sequel was delayed to 2021, and both its creative director and lead narrative designer were fired. That's when I started really realizing that there was trouble behind this game. Not too long after that, in February 2021, Paradox delayed Bloodlines 2 again and pulled Hardsuit Labs just from the project. They're like, you guys aren't on this anymore. Since then, this game has been, for the most part, in limbo. They keep saying they're working on it. Every few months, you have someone like Wester here coming and go, no, we're still working on it. It's okay. It's okay. But they refuse to tell us who the developer is. This game has been being actively worked on for a year and a half now, and we don't know who's working on it. How is that not a red flag? I don't get it. The only thing that I can think of is that it's maybe Harebrained Schemes working on it. Harebrained Schemes, people made by the team headed up by Jordan Wiseman. These are guys that did BattleTech. They also did the Shadowrun RPGs recently, so they have their toe dipped into games like that. Admittedly, not the first-person RPG that Bloodlines is going to be, but they do have an RPG background. And we haven't really heard from Harebrained Schemes since 2018 when BattleTech launched, so I wouldn't be surprised if they were working on it. But man, I feel for your Bloodlines fans. This has red flags all over it. And according to this article, by the way, they actually considered just canceling the whole thing. At this point, I have to wonder if that might not have been the right decision to do. I'd rather have no Bloodline 2 than a bad Bloodline 2. And if you can't even tell us who is working on it, that's a problem. I have no faith that this game is actually going to even come out, let alone be good. Hopefully I'm wrong, though. 2 video game adjacent stories as we wrap things up here. First up from Forbes and Paul Tassi. Paul Tassi, by the way, if you're a Destiny 2 fan, follow him on Twitter. He knows his shit. He keeps tabs on all the Destiny things going on. Resident Evil has some of the worst audience scores in Netflix's history. This show is god-awful. It is laughably bad, and it's frustrating because Lance Reddick is in there, and he's actually really good in it. I love Lance Reddick in this. And you can tell he's really trying to work with what he has. It's just what he has sucks. Let's face it. Moving to the article itself. Where was I going with this? Let's just start reading. Critics have not been the most kind to Netflix's Resident Evil series, as it currently sits a 53% Rotten Tomatoes score. But just in case you thought that was going to be one of the situations where critics hate something but the true fan loves it, the opposite is true. Audience scores are horrific for Resident Evil, some of the lowest that Tassi has ever seen from a major show on the service. The audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is a 22%. Rotten Tomatoes is on 22% and has a 3.4 in IMDb, both terrible on a level rarely seen. It's real bad. I can't. A few minutes online and you'll see just the memes being developed by this, and you might look at some of the dialogue being said and you think that they're making it up. Like, there's no way that she's looking at Zootopia porn. But guess what? She actually says she is. Now, admittedly, it was in jest, but goddamn, the writing in this show is so fucking awful. Furthermore, let's take the writing aside. Let's put it aside. How hard is it to make an adaptation that's relatively true to the source material? Why do you have to change it so radically? If you're going to make a Resident Evil TV series, you don't have to follow. I'm not asking for you to recreate the first Resident Evil or the second Resident Evil. You don't have to have Wesker or Claire or Chris or Leon or any of that in there. But keep the base idea of the franchise intact. So you can say, well, what's this do that the games don't do? Well, it's my biggest problem with that is the time jump. I don't need to see in 2040 or 2030, whatever the game's set, where everything's fallen at this point. You don't need to do that. You can tell the story, and you can even keep two girls, two sisters, but you can tell the story of two sisters in Raccoon City as it is falling apart around them. You can make an entire season of that around that. Just a one and go, and you're done. This weird time jumping and the hammering in of Wesker, who Wesker works as a video game character. He does not work as a TV series villain. He doesn't. Admittedly, though, some of the Weskers in the show aren't villainous. If you want no in-depth spoilers, but if you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. It shouldn't be this hard to make a good Resident Evil series. It shouldn't be hard to make a good Aliens game. We have a new Aliens game announcement. I did put it in here, but that's coming. It shouldn't be hard to make decent adaptations of things out there, because the source material is all there for you already. All you have to do is make something somewhat close to it. Like I said, I don't even need like the Last of Us TV show coming out. The Last of Us TV show is going to be retelling the first game. I don't need that. I know what the first game is, and I get that you want to branch out and tell those stories to it, but let's not fuck with the canon while you're telling stories about that. You don't need to have Joel and Ellie in the Last of Us TV series. What you can have is a story about Marlene, leader of the not the leader of the Fireflies. You can tell her story. You want to tell a story set in the Last of Us universe while using characters you know? Tell a story about Joel and Tess when they were going around fucking shit up 5 years before the start of the game. It is all right to not follow the plot of a story 100%, but also not deviate to the insanity that we're seeing here. On top of all this, it's just Netflix. I mean, the Netflix adaptation is a meme at this point. You had Death Note, you have Cowboy Bebop, you have that upcoming Yu Yu Hayabusa. I think it's Yu Yu Hayabusa. I have no faith in any of these, and it's annoying as hell, because these should be no-brainer, easy projects. Castlevania nailed it pretty well. I don't know why no one else can. We have one more movie-related, TV-related story before we wrap up the news here, and this is via Video Game Chronicle. Nintendo is acquiring a CG company which will be renamed Nintendo Pictures. Nintendo has announced that plans to acquire Japanese CG company Dynamo Pictures. The Tokyo-based company specializes in the production of CG for movies, animation, games, and television, as well as motion capture work for video distribution. Nintendo plans to acquire 100% of Dynamo's outstanding shares and make it a wholly owned subsidiary in a deal expected to close October 3rd. Following the acquisition, Nintendo plans to rename the company Nintendo Pictures Company Limited, at which point it will, quote, focus on development and visual content using Nintendo IPs. In the past, the company has produced CG for a number of movies and TV shows, including Yuri on Ice, Aya and the Witch, and Season 2 of Netflix's Ghost in the Shell standalone complex 2045. Though the initial instinct would be to assume the acquisition would result in more Nintendo animated movies and TV in the future, it should be noted that Dynamo also specializes in developing visual content for games as well. This company worked on Death Stranding, Nier Replicant, Persona 5. They also made some films for Nintendo in the past, including the cutscenes of Metroid's Other M, a series of Pokemon short movies, and some things for the Wii U as well. The planned rebranding to Nintendo Pictures is not to be confused with Nintendo Studios, which has recently appeared on copyright listings for the upcoming Super Mario animated movie. I wanted to mention that last point right there because that's why I think they're going with Nintendo Pictures here. I think Nintendo Studios is going to be their big, their Illumination equivalent, their Pixar equivalent. These are your feature-length films. Nintendo Pictures, I get the feeling, might be like little tiny 10 or 15 minute YouTube shows. So imagine like Pikmin, the 4-part animated miniseries adventure, or a series of 5-minute vignettes set in the Metroid universe, or even just see support for cutscenes. Mario has cutscenes. You might not think about Mario, in the same way you would think of Final Fantasy 16, and it's an impressive ass CG in there, but Mario does have its cutscenes. Let's not forget the whole New Donk City video that was going around there. They could be hiring these people just to make commercials for all we know. We don't know exactly what's going on here with this company, but it does seem that Nintendo is going to be coming, or rather, I should say, this opens the door for Nintendo to get more aggressive into moving beyond just video games, a move that they have been very reluctant to do, by the way, until just recently. Nintendo does not like straying from its wheelhouse and doesn't like other people playing with their toys outside of their control as well. The more you diversify from just video games into little movies and films and short films, the more likely you're going to have people doing things with those, which means you have to give up a little bit of control. You can't just DMCA your way into isolation. It doesn't work, Nintendo. And the more you grow and the more medias that you try to embrace, the more you're going to see that happen. I'd be very interested in see what's in the future as far as this company goes, though we're probably not going to hear much from them for years, if at all. They could just become a silent workhorse in the background when, keeps cranking things out. Anyways, that does it for the news. We have a couple of new releases that I want to get into before we wrap things up. First up, Endling, Extinction is Forever on the PlayStation 4, PC, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch. As the last motherfucker on Earth, your cub needs all your care to survive in a merciless world that slowly destroys itself. You have to help them, teach them, and save them. And you should never forget that extinction is forever. This really reminds me kind of like, what was it, Far Lone Sails or Inside or any myriad of those 2D platformers where you just kind of scroll around and it's more of an art house film than it is an actual platformer. In this case, it's an ecologically devastated world. You see a bunch of people walking around in hazmat suits trying to catch the fox as she's dodging past them. I do want to sit down and play this. I might actually do it this week on stream. I'm not positive if I really want to pick it up or not, but I like games like that. I liked I can't remember if it was called Far Lone Sails or Lone Far Sails, or I get that vibe from it, and I really enjoyed playing that, so I might take a look at it. Also out this week on PC, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, as well as in Game Pass enabled, so you have Game Pass will be getting this free, As Dusk Falls. Explore the entangled lives of two families across 30 years in an original interactive drama from Interior Night. Started in 1998 with a robbery gone wrong, the characters' lives depend on the choices you make. This is that Telltale style of game where it's narrative focused and you make choices and watch those choices play out in horrifying ways. It seems to be more grounded in reality, so don't expect a horror film from this, at least from what I have seen. That title made me thought it was maybe like a slasher film for some reason, but it seems to be a lot more grounded than that. I'm not going to lie, I had a lot more interest in this game when I thought it might have a supernatural twist to it, but the more I read about it, the more realistic it sounds, the less I am into it. Also, it looks a little janky. I'm kind of surprised for the quality on this, but it is on my radar. I might take a look at it eventually. Also out this week on the PlayStation 4 and 5 and PC, Stray. Lost and alone and separated from the family, Stray Cat must untangle an ancient mystery to escape a long-forgotten cyber city and find their way home. This is the cat platformer. The internet loved this game when it was first announced from Annapurna Interactive, or the publisher's boot. I think it's actually their most concurrent played game on Steam right now, like ever. So it seems to be getting decent reviews. 4 to 5 hour playthrough. Take a look at it. I'll be looking at it sometime this weekend. Finally this week, Live Alive on the Switch, or Live Alive, one or the other. This storied RPG by Takashi Tokita, known for his work on Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy IV, has been revitalized in stunning HD 2D. This is an old Super Nintendo RPG that never made its way to America, and they remade it. They gave it the Octopath Traveler treatment. It has that HD 2D look where it's 3D, but there are only 2D panes on 3D. If you've seen Octopath Traveler, you know exactly the art style that you're looking with here. Live Alive is an RPG that deals, I believe, with 8 different characters across 8 different time periods, fighting this evil being across them all. And we'll leave it at that. Each world is radically different from the other ones. I think there's one that's like millions of years ago, like in the ancient past, so you're a cave person. Then you have like the old west world. I think there's a medieval one, there's a futuristic one. I remember playing a fan translation of this for the Super Nintendo years ago. I want to take a look at this though. I really enjoyed that game when I played it then. I'm very curious to see if it holds up. I have like 20 years of haze, so I don't remember much about it, and there's definitely rose-colored glasses on it. I'm very curious to know what kind of remake this is going to be. Furthermore, if this sells well, we might get more of these HD 2D remakes. God forbid they release Terranigma on the Switch finally for an American audience. I know they got Front Mission coming, the very first Front Mission. Maybe we'll get some more stuff like that. The holy grail of them all would be to see Final Fantasy VI remade in this HD 2D style. That would be the crown jewel, I think, of it. So I'm going to be supporting Square in this endeavor. I'll be picking this game up for certain. What you do is up to you. But if you like old Super Nintendo RPGs, back when Square was the golden child, that name on a Super Nintendo game, Square, before Square Enix, Square, was almost a guaranteed sign of quality at that time. And this is one of their games. Actually, I think, believe it or not, I think Live Alive is actually Enix, now that I think about it. I need to look this up. I think it's Square, but it might have been Enix. Oh, I'm dying here. What did it come out as? Published by Square Enix. What was it when it first came out? Square. Square made it. Square made it before Enix did. All right. I thought so. Enix had some other games that weren't necessarily quite as good as Square. Yeah, back when they were called Squaresoft. That could be what I'm thinking of. Anyways, that does it for the new releases, which means that does it for the show as well. Thank you all for showing up. This has been GamePoints episode 319. We do stream this show live every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time over at Twitch TV/GamePoints. And I'm more than happy to have you all here live. I always get a few lurkers running around. Rocco, thank you very much for being participative in the chat. And to anyone else standing by, thank you for watching. If you can't join us live, however, totally understandable. This video goes up on a myriad of video hosting platforms: YouTube, Rumble, BitChute. There's Discord you can join, link provided down there, as well as links to all the stories we went over today, so that way you can do your own due diligence of researching them. You can follow myself, Stephen Brown, at CapitalistPig21, and I do stream throughout the week, once again, here at Twitch TV/GamePoints, and look forward to seeing you all there sooner or later. Thank you all for showing up. Until next week, I'm out of here.